Reports claim that Dwayne Keefe D. Davis suddenly shifted his story in a completely new direction. Instead of continuing to point at Sean Diddy Combs, he redirected attention towards Snoop Dogg. This is the same controversial witness who spent years repeatedly naming Diddy, and now he appears to have changed course.
Snoop Dogg climbed onto a private jet at night and got out of the country, and do not let anyone tell you it was for a tour date. The real reason is a betrayal so ugly it makes your stomach turn. Sean Diddy Combs secretly turned him into the federal government as the man who ordered Shakur taken out. Insiders say Diddy's camp is already telling people they have evidence to prove it at trial this August. That is not a rumor drifting through comment sections anymore. That is a convicted felon flipping on another legend, and it has already put Snoop into exile before a single charge has even been filed. The Keefe D trial is now the countdown clock. August 10th, 2026, and Snoop is already gone.
At the same time, reports suggest Diddy didn't stay silent. He allegedly responded by pointing back at Snoop, with his side claiming they have real evidence ready for court. With Keefe D's trial approaching, the situation feels like a countdown that's already in motion. But this is where everything splits apart. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has been very direct. Diddy has never been considered a suspect in the killing of Tupac Shakur. That's not vague wording. It's a firm official position.
Now stop there and actually feel how strange that is. Keefe D was supposed to be the weapon against Diddy. That was the script everyone believed for years. Keefe D talks. Diddy finally answers for what happened in Las Vegas. That was the payoff everyone was waiting for. Instead, according to multiple insider reports, Keefe D opened his mouth and pointed in a completely different direction. He pointed at Snoop. The same unreliable witness who spent years naming Diddy suddenly pivoted, and Diddy reportedly did not just sit in his prison cell quietly. He turned on Snoop. He gave him up. And now, Diddy's side is telling people they have something concrete to present when Keefe D finally goes to trial. That date is not far away. That is the fuse burning in plain sight. But here is where the story immediately snaps in half. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has an official statement, and they have been absolutely clear about it. Sean Combs has never been considered a suspect in the Shakur homicide investigation. Never considered a suspect. That is not a careful hedge. That is the official record. So if Diddy was never a suspect, why does a 2009 police interview have Keefe D naming him 77 times? Why is that interview sitting in court filings right now, not as speculation, but as a documented fact that prosecutors have entered into the record? The police say one thing, the filings say another, and that contradiction is not a small wrinkle you can smooth over. It is the crack running through the entire story.
Yet at the same time, a 2009 interview shows Keefe D repeatedly mentioning Diddy, and that interview is part of formal court records. So on one side, law enforcement dismisses any link, and on the other, documented testimony places Diddy in the conversation again and again. That contradiction isn't minor. It sits at the center of the entire situation. Looking closer at that 2000...
Let me pull that thread a little more because it matters. 2009. Keefe D sits across from a detective and says Diddy offered $1 million to have Shakur and Suge Knight taken out. He says Diddy was scared of Suge, genuinely scared. He says Diddy asked after the shooting, "Is that us?" And Keefe D answered yes, beaming with pride. That is in the record. That is not a tabloid invention from a source who will not show their face. But here's the part that makes your head spin. Keefe D has also admitted he lies for money. He has said flat out that he made things up because there was cash in it. He said his own memoir was not even his words. So what do you do with that? Do you believe the man when he names Diddy? Do you believe him when he says he was lying the whole time? You cannot do both. And that is exactly where Diddy wants everyone to be confused. Now look at Snoop. An innocent man hears a known liar has pointed a finger at him. He laughs. He calls his lawyer. He dares anyone to come forward. He does not climb onto a private jet at night and disappear to a location nobody can confirm. That is what an innocent person does. But Snoop did the third thing, the thing nobody asked for. He left. The official story is business, but that explanation is so thin you can see right through it. What business trip cannot wait until morning? What business requires a midnight escape on a private jet? When the cover story is that weak, the real story is usually sitting right behind it. And the real story here is that Snoop is treating a liar's accusation like an active arrest warrant. That is not the behavior of someone who thinks this is nonsense.
2009 account, Keefe D allegedly told investigators that Diddy offered a large sum of money to have Tupac.
And here is the trap, and it is genuinely nasty. If Snoop returns to the United States and nothing happens, if the FBI never shows up with handcuffs, then his flight looks paranoid. It looks like the act of a man who assumed guilt when there was none. Why would you run if you had nothing to fear? That question follows him forever. Conversely, if he never comes back, if he builds a new life overseas and lets the case stay open forever, then the story writes itself. He knew something. He knew enough to stay away. Either way, he loses. He cannot win. The loop closes around him and does not open again. That is not a legal problem. That is a psychological trap, and he is already inside it. But here's the part that should make you genuinely uncomfortable. The person making the accusation is not a clean witness. He is not a civic-minded citizen coming forward with a heavy heart. Sean Combs was convicted in July of 2025 on 2 counts of transportation to engage in commercial work. He is serving 50 months. And we have all seen the hotel surveillance video that CNN published. You remember it. Diddy, wearing only a towel, chasing Cassie Ventura down a hotel hallway, grabbing her by the neck, throwing her to the ground, kicking her while she is curled up on the floor, dragging her by her sweatshirt like she was nothing. He apologized later. He said he was disgusted. But the video exists. It is irrefutable. So here is the question the story cannot escape. Can a man like that be believed when he points at someone else?
And Suge Knight targeted. He described Diddy as being afraid of Suge and even claimed Diddy asked after the shooting whether it had been carried out, receiving confirmation. These claims exist in official records, not just rumors. But the credibility issue hits immediately. Keefe D has also admitted he has lied for money and even suggested his own book wasn't truly his account. That leaves everything unstable. If he's telling the truth,
you see the problem immediately. If you dismiss Diddy as a liar, the whole accusation against Snoop collapses. There is no case. There is just a convicted felon throwing names around to save himself, maybe to get a deal, maybe to shift attention away from his own legal troubles. But if you believe Diddy, you are putting your trust in a man who has been convicted of transporting people for prohibited purposes, a man captured on video committing violence against a former partner, a man facing more than 70 civil lawsuits from more than 120 accusers. That is not a witness. That is a disaster zone. And yet his word is the entire engine of this story. The FBI has not confirmed anything. No warrant has been issued. The only thing driving Snoop into exile is the claim of a man the police have already said was never a suspect. And watch what is happening underneath the surface while everyone stares at Snoop's empty mansion. The Shakur family is not waiting around for the police to figure this out. They hired Alex Spiro, the same lawyer who represents some of the biggest names in entertainment, and they are actively investigating whether Diddy had any role in what happened to Shakur. That is not a symbolic gesture. That is a family that believes something is hidden. If their investigation turns up anything, if they find evidence that connects Diddy to that night in Las Vegas, then the whole case cracks open again. And if that happens while Snoop is still overseas, still running from a threat that came from the same witness, the optics become almost impossible to untangle. 2 men, one in prison and one in exile, both tied to the same changing story. Then you have Suge Knight talking from his prison cell, and love him or hate him, he was in the car. He is the only living witness to the shooting itself. He claims Snoop tried to help Keefe D get bail. He says Snoop was working quietly to free the one man whose testimony could put him in the crosshairs. Snoop fired back with a strange denial. I realize your real lies. That is not a clean denial. That is defensive in a way that suggests the fight was already happening in his head, before the rest of us knew there was a fight at all. And now he is overseas, and he cannot clarify what he meant. Clarifying would require him to come home, and coming home means facing whatever is waiting for him.
Truth now, was he lying before? Or the other way around? Both can't be true at the same time. Then the focus shifts to Snoop. The narrative paints a picture of him leaving the country quickly on a private jet, with speculation suggesting it wasn't just routine travel. The idea being pushed is that Diddy secretly identified.
So where does that leave us? Snoop is gone. The August trial is coming. Diddy is sitting in a federal prison watching the spotlight move away from him for the first time in 30 years. The Shakur family is digging. Suge is talking. Valletta Wallace, the mother of Notorious B.I.G., said she wants to slap the daylights out of Diddy. She said she is sick to her stomach. And the only person whose word could break this open is a man who has already admitted he lies for money and says his own book was not his words. That is not a clean case. That is not a simple story. That is a mess where every single person has dirty hands, and the only question is whose version of events you are willing to stomach. Do you believe the monster when he names someone else? Because right now, that is the only question that actually matters, and nobody has a clean answer. While everyone has been frozen on that image of Snoop's private jet leaving at night, the machinery underneath this story has been grinding in a completely different direction. The Shakur family quietly retained Alex Spiro. That's the lawyer for Elon Musk. That's the lawyer for Jay-Z. They are not writing letters or issuing statements. They are actively investigating whether Diddy had any role in what happened to Shakur. The Las Vegas police say Diddy was never a suspect. The Shakur family does not care what the police say. They are running their own parallel investigation, and if they find anything, they can force a criminal referral. That is not a publicity stunt. That is a family that believes something was buried, and they brought in heavy artillery to dig it up. Consider what that means for Diddy's long-term exposure. For 30 years, the official denial protected him. The police statement that he was never a suspect was enough to keep the story from gaining real legal traction, but the Shakur family is not bound by that denial. They do not need the police to cooperate. They can build their own case, find their own witnesses, and hand everything directly to prosecutors who might actually move. That is the kind of threat that does not appear on a court docket. It appears in a private investigator's file. The silence from the Shakur camp is not reassuring. That is the silence of people who are waiting until they have something nobody can talk them out of. You do not hire Alex Spiro to send polite inquiries. You hire him to find what law enforcement missed.
Guide him to authorities, and insiders claim evidence will surface in court. But none of that has been confirmed by officials. No charges, no warrants, just claims circulating without formal backing. Without that, The interpretation of his travel becomes speculation rather than fact. There's also a psychological angle being pushed. If Snoop returns and—
Now look at what is happening inside Diddy's own legal situation, because the timeline is getting stranger by the week. He is serving 50 months, but his lawyers are arguing in federal court that what prosecutors called prohibited transportation was actually protected expression. They're saying the gatherings were amateur performances covered by the First Amendment. That argument is in front of federal judges right now. If he wins, he could walk free well before 2028. Prosecutors called the appeal meritless, but that does not mean the judges will agree. A free Diddy controls his own narrative. A free Diddy has media access. And a free Diddy, still drowning in more than 70 civil cases, has every reason to keep pointing at someone else. You see where this is going. The man whose word drove Snoop into exile might not even be behind bars by the time the August trial arrives. If he walks, the pressure on Snoop does not decrease, it multiplies. Because now the accuser is not a convicted felon locked away. He is a free man with a platform and a clear motive. He can go on every show. He can talk to every reporter. He can keep feeding the story while Snoop stays silent overseas, unable to respond without coming home and facing whatever is waiting for him. That is not a fair fight. That is a trap with a moving wall, and Snoop is the only one inside it.
nothing happens, his departure could look unnecessary or suspicious. If he stays away, it could appear as if he's avoiding something. That creates a situation where every move is interpreted negatively, regardless of reality. But again, that's perception, not proof. Meanwhile, Diddy's own situation complicates everything further. He's dealing with serious—
Then you have Suge Knight, and this is where the story leaves legal filings behind and enters something much stranger. He was driving the car when the shooting happened. He is the only living witness to the actual event. From his prison cell, he has been giving interviews like a man with nothing left to lose. He claims Snoop tried to help Keef D get bail. He says Snoop was working behind the scenes to free the one man whose testimony could put him in the crosshairs. Suge is not a clean source. He has every reason to want Snoop to look bad, especially after Snoop ended up owning Death Row Records. But he was there. And when a man who was in the car starts naming names, you cannot just wave him off. His credibility is low. His proximity is not. Here is where the history gets even darker. Suge has also claimed that Shakur, in his final days, asked his own mother to let him go. He says she gave him pills. He says she told doctors not to bring him back. That is Suge's account, not confirmed, and you have to handle it with care. But the fact that he is saying it at all tells you something about the atmosphere around this case. The man who was in the car is now telling stories that make the official version look incomplete. Whether you believe him or not, his voice adds a layer of instability that the legal system cannot control, and that instability spreads to everyone connected to that night.
Legal issues, multiple lawsuits, and public controversy, including the widely discussed incident involving Cassie Ventura. That background raises a difficult question about credibility. Even if he accuses someone else, how much weight should that carry given his own legal and personal controversies? At the same time,
do not forget about Valletta Wallace. The mother of Notorious B.I.G. watched the hotel video of Diddy, and she said she wants to slap the daylights out of him. Those are her exact words. She said she is sick to her stomach. She said she is ashamed and embarrassed. That is not a legal filing. That is a mother who lost her son in the same war, watching the man who was supposed to be family get exposed in the ugliest way possible. When Valletta Wallace speaks, you listen. She is not chasing headlines. She is disgusted. Her disgust is a reminder that this story is not just about trial dates and appeal arguments. It is about real people who have been carrying this weight for 3 decades. Now look at the sheer scale of what Diddy is facing outside of the Shakur case. More than 70 civil lawsuits, more than 120 accusers. That number alone should stop you. Even if only a fraction of those have merit, the pattern is impossible to ignore. Here's the part that makes the whole thing feel structurally unsound. The original source of the accusation chain, Keef D, has admitted he lies for money. He said his own memoir was not even his words. He said he made things up because there was cash in it. So the man who first pointed at Diddy and then pivoted and pointed at Snoop is telling you not to believe him. That is not a clean crack in the case. That is the whole floor giving way. Let me pull in something that has been sitting in the background for years. Kirk Burroughs, the former president of Bad Boy, has said Diddy was jealous of the friendship between Shakur and Biggie. He claims Diddy wanted the spotlight for himself. That is a former insider, not a random voice. Burroughs also said that after Biggie passed away, Rolling Stone wanted to put him on the cover, but Diddy insisted on taking the spot himself to promote his own album. That is not evidence of anything criminal, but it is evidence of a pattern. A man who needs to be the center of attention. A man who does not like being eclipsed. And a man who, according to Keef D, offered $1 million to have Shakur taken out. The motive layer keeps reappearing from different directions, and that accumulation matters. Then you have the strangest story of all, and you have to hear this one carefully because it sounds like something from a script. Suge Knight claims Prince once seated him and Diddy at the same table on purpose. According to Suge, Prince knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to see what would happen. Suge says he leaned over and told Diddy they should settle things in the restroom. He claims Diddy stood up, got heated, and then was rushed out by security with coats thrown over his head. That story is unverified. It comes from Suge, who has every reason to make himself look tough. But the fact that it exists, that someone who was there is telling it, tells you how deep this runs. These men were circling each other for years. The violence that took Shakur was always the shadow over every room they shared.
Tupac's family isn't relying on public narratives alone. They've hired Alex Spiro to independently investigate whether Diddy had any involvement.
Pull the camera back and look at the full board. The Shakur family is investigating with a top-tier lawyer. Diddy might walk free on appeal. Suge is talking from prison. Valletta Wallace is furious. More than 120 accusers are lined up. A former bad boy president is describing a pattern of jealousy and control. Keefe D, the original source, says he was lying for money. Every layer of this story is unstable. Every person involved has dirty hands or a clear motive to twist the truth. Through all of it, Snoop is sitting overseas, unable to come home without looking guilty and unable to stay away without looking like he knows something he should not know. The trap from the first half is still there, but now the walls have moved in closer and the people standing outside the trap are all holding matches. The question we started with is still the only one that matters, but it feels heavier now. Can a man like Diddy be believed when he points at someone else? The Shakur family is treating his possible involvement as a real target. They are spending real money on real lawyers. That does not mean Diddy is telling the truth. It means enough smoke has accumulated that people who loved Shakur cannot afford to ignore it anymore. Snoop, whether he is completely innocent or something else entirely, is trapped in the middle of that smoke. Nobody knows what the Shakur investigation will find. Nobody knows if Diddy's appeal will succeed. Nobody knows if Keefe D is finally telling the truth or lying again. This is not going to resolve cleanly. There is no moment where the truth arrives in a neat statement. This is going to keep getting uglier. So, do you think the Shakur family is actually going to find something real? Or is this just more noise around a cold case that will never close? And what about Diddy trying to walk free on a First Amendment argument while all of this is happening around him? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you stand on this mess. We will keep watching. Talk soon.